Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jen, and I'm a local resident that lives in Searchmont, just downstream from the proposed wastewater treatment plant. Today, I have with me Joni McGuffin. She is part of the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy. This is the third and final public conversation and opportunity for us to gather in person to talk about this wastewater treatment plant proposal. And ultimately, our goal is to empower you to go home and use your voice to contribute comments before the deadline closes tomorrow at midnight. We've also put a lot of work into creating two simple letters that you could use. One is expert informed, and another one is based off of information that's been made available in the supporting documentation for this proposal. If you did join us online for the last two presentations, there is value in watching this one. This one is going to be the most comprehensive presentation we've had so far because this morning we just finalized the full understanding of what we received from a wastewater expert that we were able to retain through funding provided by Freshwater Futures. She's been in the industry for over 20 years. She's part of OWA, which is the Ontario On-Site Wastewater Association, and we retained her to give us a high-level analysis with the funds and limited time that was available to highlight anything that we can use in our comments to really draw attention to this proposal. So I'm going to be sharing part of the majority of the presentation where we kind of get into the specifics. We talk a little bit about them. It's important to mention that there's just not enough time and it's not humanly possible for us to go through everything in this setting. So it's going to be, and it's designed to be, a high-level review of what we really need to focus on, and then that letter will give you much more of that information. But before I get into that, Joni is going to take us through just an overview of the Goulais River watershed, the ecological importance of it, how it contributes to the watersheds of the Great Lakes, and sort of a little bit about the work that she does and why we're here and why it's important that we use our voice before we lose it. And the opportunity to lose our voice is tomorrow. So I'm going to hand it to you, Joni. Thank you for taking us through this. You're welcome.
I would like to start our presentation today by acknowledging the beautiful river, Goulais River, that flows by us right now. An Indigenous elder, Josephine Baumandamin, walked all around the Great Lakes. Her picture is over here, and the Goulais River is listening to us. Goulais River has less standing in a court of law than a corporation does, whether it's a corporation like the Searchmont Ski Resort or it's a corporation like the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy. Our organization has a social business model which is about giving back and learning, and it's why we can do this work of holding community gatherings. Everything we do goes back into the mission of caring for the waters that flow into and through Lake Superior and on down to the Great Lakes. We're a water care organization. The corporate model, it prioritizes a financial model, and that is to give back to shareholders and think of the financials first. And it takes a community and a big, I'd say a hug, but to enable a corporation, sometimes not informed or not wanting to be informed for whatever reasons, that we need to think about this differently for the future, for the health of our beautiful planet we live on. So I can't play the video here, but I want you to, I think you all know the sound of the water. This is in the spring paddling down the Goulais. She's been flowing through here for thousands of years, and all of the life support, as Josephine Baumandamin said, water is life and water is sacred. And whether it is those that live in the river, along the river, who flow through the groundwaters that flow into the river, who are in the trees itself, in the vegetation, all of us are part of this beautiful water system. As we know, we're 3/4 water. So I would like to start by thanking Freshwater Future, who provided some grant funding for these Goulais River gatherings and for also enabling us to hire that wastewater expert who could give us that expert opinion on the Searchmont wastewater treatment plant proposal. So the materials, as Jen has explained, which she'll be going into. Again, this is a bit of a high level, just as I've said, flowing through here for thousands of years and making life possible for all. This map is over here, and just to, I'm sorry, I put Searchmonts on here so we can see, there's a little red, so we can see where the site is that we're discussing today. And we will reference it in further talks later. Just to acknowledge that this is one of the most important watershed ecosystems in the Lake Superior watershed. So Goulais River is not just a line on a map. Goulais River is part of a family of watersheds that feeds all of the lower Great Lakes. And it happens to be an incredibly biodiverse region. Into Goulais Bay, Chihuahua, where it flows. Goulais River is enabling such species as the sturgeon, which date back to the days of the dinosaurs, and very, very important species that Jen will go through that are a part of this, this home here. So just acknowledging the tremendous importance that this river watershed holds for the entire Lake Superior Basin and all of the lower Great Lakes is really important to understand as we think about this work. I just put 2 images in here just because I want to remind folks that the community members are not just those with 2 legs and humans. And I love maps. I am constantly trying to, and with students showing the context within, if we look from outer space, we live at the bow tie of the Great Lakes. Pretty amazing place to live on this beautiful Mother Earth. So who is the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy? We are an organization that focuses on the Lake Superior watershed, not just the lake, through conservation, education, and active participation. The conservation piece being the preserves, education at the preserves, in the classroom, in the public, and also active participation through a big canoe program that we have. And to fulfill our whole health of the watershed mission, to almost 22 years ago, we formed 2 sister charities registered in Canada and the US. So land trusts are a community well known in the United States, lesser known here, but we have a very active, robust land trust community in Ontario, and we are part of that family. But I'm showing this map because I want to show all these different land trusts, and we're 3 red ones on the eastern shores of the lake. So that family cumulative impact of actually caring for particular pieces of land. This is a wetland story that is right at the mouth of Goulais River on Chihuahua, Goulais Bay. Chihuahua means the place that hugs you. Miriam Agawa shared that with us. And Nanabajung, a very sacred place, Batchewana First Nation, the Gargantua Islands Preserve, the islands off what some will know as Lake Superior Provincial Park. It's an archipelago of islands that gives us so, and we have another preserve at the top of a watershed. We're working on others, and it enables us an opportunity for that educational piece and that public engagement with nature. So creative corporate partnerships, we have a few already, but they can support education, conservation in communities through a variety of strategies. And there is a responsibility, as I mentioned at the beginning, for corporations to start thinking of social business models that aren't just about their return on their investments. So from now and into the future, it involves all aspects of the Searchmont resorts, consumption of Goulais River, and its water conservation measures, its wastewater processes, everything anyone is doing with Goulais River needs to be considered. And when you're a really big user of that water, and it can have a really, really huge impact, you even need to take more responsibility. The outcome affects the long-term health of Goulais River, all its inhabitants, including Goulais Bay, Lake Superior, on down. So I just pulled a few titles from the different publications and so on, just words that jumped out at me in discussions and articles, newspaper, online, that are taken from ski resorts in the industry, talking about consumption of water, conservation of water, less waste, but also that opportunity to actually be more cost effective, and in places that are experiencing droughts today that are in ski resort regions. Conservation at ski resort, what's being done? There is a lot being done out there, and many are making significant changes to help support water management within their gray water recycling systems, harvesting rainwater, recycling wastewater. Like, there's all kinds of things. People are also turning wastewater into snow. Are these things what is possible? I am no expert in this, but everything needs to be looked at, and this is part of what we're asking the question about today. So we all have a responsibility, of course, for keeping water and waterways healthy, but as a corporate citizen, they have a special responsibility to care for Goulais River because of that piece of really using a tremendous amount of Goulais River and having a big effect. So I'll finally finish with this last slide, is that one of the areas that we can support as the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy, an opportunity for a corporate partnership, is to have a corporate partnership that can support a long-term, citizen-led, independent water quality monitoring program on Goulais River. And we would, in fact, do that with Nordic, Algoma University's Nordic Water Rangers program. I put the backpacks there. We're going to be acquiring those soon. We have some support to do that. So we do encourage you to check off a yes on our thing if you're interested in a future being part of a water quality monitoring program. So now I'm just going to jump into your program here. Sorry, I don't have it. Oh. You can come and sit here and make your way through.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joni. Hold on, sit. Okay. All right, well, welcome. As I mentioned, my name is Jen. Before I get into anything, to protect myself and my children, I am going to read a full disclaimer. This summary is provided in good faith to support community awareness and engagement. It reflects my interpretation of publicly available reports, studies, meeting materials, and statements from the proponent and the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks included in the Environmental Compliance Approval application on the Environmental Registry of Ontario. The information presented is based solely on those public documents. I make no claims about the completeness or accuracy of third-party materials and do not intend to misrepresent or criticize any individual company or agency. No allegations of wrongdoing are being made. If any information is later shown to be incorrect, I will update it. This material is for the general information only and should not be considered legal, technical, or professional advice. Any errors or misunderstandings are unintentional, and I welcome clarification from the proponent, the MECP, or community members. Thank you for allowing me to go through that. I just wanted to share a little bit about sort of what brought me here today. As I mentioned, I live downstream of the proposed deposit site. I received the first notice in the mail. It was a letter that informed me of this wastewater treatment plant application. I was advised that I had 14 days to consult with the engineering firm or the proponent, which is Searchmont in this case, to engage in any kind of question asking. I had a lot of questions, naturally, and through that process, the extension there was an extension to when they were going to submit the application, and I was provided with a copy of the assimilative capacity study and told that it supports the river's ability to receive the waste. And I was given some links to the ministry websites to see, sort of guidelines and standards that companies would have to follow when they operate plants like this. I was then invited to the public information night, which was held in July, and we received 5 days notice of the date and time for that event. The event was 2 hours long, and it contained 5 or 6 display boards, 2 of which contained images, 1 of which was next steps. And truthfully, I walked away from that information night with a lot more questions that I went in with. So that kind of kickstarted my own journey with consultation with the engineers and a deeper dive in the information that's been made available. So we were told that the application would be submitted at the end of July of 2025, this past summer, and then it wasn't officially registered and posted on the Environmental Registry of Ontario until October 9th. Upon receiving, we were advised too that we'd be notified when it was posted, but I had been checking every day since July. And so when I seen the notice come up, and there was a 45-day commenting window, I followed the process, requested the supporting documentation, and what I received was a 461-page design brief. Which included the assimilative capacity study, which we'll talk about, and the design proposal. As an average everyday person, I don't have a background in wastewater. I'm not an engineer, and so it was a lot to digest. And a lot of the questions that I had from the information night back in July remained unanswered. And there was also just a lot of information within that design brief in which I could not make sense of. So it's sort of kickstarted this journey, and coming into partnership with the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy, which we just crossed paths when they were here in this location back in November for a Goulais Water Talk, has been such a wonderful experience. So as I may have mentioned already, it's just not possible for us in this setting to go through everything. It's just not humanly possible. There's a lot of information there. So what I'm hoping to take you through right now is just a high-level version of what we really want to dial into. So I'm ready for the next slide. So what is the ERO? The ERO is the Environmental Registry of Ontario. The whole purpose of the Environmental Registry of Ontario is to provide the public with an opportunity to share thoughts and comments on projects that take place that could impact the environment. There's a lot of theory that it's already out of our hands, there's nothing we can do. This is our opportunity, this is our public right, and our unique voices matter. What happens through this process, once the consultation window closes tomorrow at midnight, is they will have to look at every submission that they've received and consider it fairly. Now, once their decision is made, those submissions become part of that. Now, nobody's identity would be visible in that. If anything in your comment contains your name or your address or any personal information, it's equally considered, but it will not be published. And I think that that's important. So in the attachment you'll receive from us today, there's a link that will bring you right to the anonymous comment section. So we'll go to the next slide here. And ultimately, what we would love for you to take away from this presentation, this event, is to submit something. Maybe there's a certain piece that stands out. Or maybe you're able to go and look at those letters, copy them, paste them, put your own comments in addition to them, if you're able, and send them. So we'll go to the next slide. So what exactly is an ECA? So it's an environmental compliance approval. The whole purpose of this application is to approve the SRB wastewater treatment plant and its ability to treat the wastewater that will be generated by the site. This is an image of the infrastructure that was included in the design brief. I don't know if this is the exact one they'll use, but this was in the design brief. The ECA is going to look at 3 main components. It's going to look at that assimilative capacity study. It's going to look at the proposed SRB system's ability to meet the limits in that assimilative capacity study, and it looks at if the environment, aquatic, and human life will be affected. Can they comply with the environment, and should they get this approval? Next slide. So what is the assimilative capacity study? This is really important for us to dial into. The assimilative capacity study is the study that evaluates the river's capacity to receive and assimilate or break down waste. So this is a key document in this proposal.
Hi, come on in.
This document is looking at what is the current water quality of the river? What are the flow conditions of the river? Can the river safely receive this waste? Can the river safely break down this waste? And then what are the limits and objectives that whatever technology they want to use needs to be used in order to meet those limits? So this document is a huge backbone of this proposal. And what we're going to take you through next is some of the features in this study that just don't give us enough clarity to really truly support if the river can receive and break down waste. So next slide. So the Goulais River is already showing signs of stress. That's what the facts tell us in that study. The assimilative capacity shows that 25% of downstream phosphorus samples exceeded the provincial water quality objective without any wastewater in the mix. More importantly, the assimilative capacity study also shows us that downstream, it's already classified as being at the provincial water quality objective already with no wastewater. Another thing that's important to mention too is the downstream location that was used to collect this data was collected at the Highway 17 bridge where the Goulais crosses under. And it's at the provincial water quality objective at that location in the river. It doesn't appear to consider what the water quality is beyond that bridge at Highway 17. So if it's at the provincial water quality objective at the bridge, what does phosphorus look like further downstream? What does it look like in Goulais Bay? It doesn't address that. The river also shows and experiences low flows, bacteria spikes, and limited winter oxygen data. So what this really means is that the river might not have consistent ability to receive and or break down this waste, and it also doesn't consider what's happening in the Goulais beyond that bridge. Next slide. I just wanted to show you an example of, or not an example, but the chart that shows this the downstream water quality results from the sampling program. And you can see here with phosphorus, out of the 20 samples taken, those 5 were already over that provincial water quality objective, which makes up that 20%, 25% that I referenced. Again, before any wastewater is even in the river. Next slide. So why is phosphorus important? And I'm excited to share something extra. So phosphorus is a nutrient that plants and algae need to grow. The Ontario has set the provincial water quality objective for total phosphorus for a reason. And it's based on decades of science that shows if phosphorus rises above that level, rivers and lakes become vulnerable to nuisance algae, cloudy water, oxygen depletion, fish stress, habitat decline, increased drinking water treatment needs, and higher pathogen levels like E. coli. It exists for a reason, and it's already at that limit. Next slide. Phosphorus doesn't necessarily affect human health directly. However, elevated phosphorus can create conditions that would affect human health, like harmful algae blooms that can produce toxins, increased organic matter, more challenges with drinking water treatment, conditions that coincide with that higher E. coli, and degraded recreational water quality. So it's not toxic by itself, but its impacts on the ecosystem can be. And one thing that I just learned last night myself was that Goulais Bay has already experienced water boil advisories. It's in our local newspaper, Sioux Today. The last one was in May of 2025. And it notes in that article that the advisory was issued because of natural runoff from the Goulais River in and related to the substance of that turbidity and that cloudy water. So they're already experiencing the effects of high phosphorus without any waste in the water. Next. So again, it matters for the Goulais River because it flows into Goulais Bay. It flows into Lake Superior. And what we know is that Ontario has their own Great Lakes strategy and total phosphorus report. And those reports talk about how phosphorus drives algae blooms, and it's already a major issue with the Great Lakes. Protecting Goulais River is protecting Lake Superior, which is honoring the Canada-Ontario Great Lakes Agreement, which is a third and separate piece that the government focuses on with phosphorus. Next one. So we look at how the monitoring data set is too small. So provincially, the government does collect water quality data on rivers, lakes, and streams. The provincial-led water quality monitoring for Ontario ended in 1990. The proponents, while preparing for this application, took it upon themselves with a consultant at hand to create their own water quality monitoring program to produce the data for this application. What we know in here is that the ministry in 2021 had notified them that they typically would need to collect data monthly over 2 years or seasonally over 3. But in the assimilative capacity study, only 20 sampling events were completed with very limited sampling over only 16 months. And we know that the ministry requests that 2 to 3 years. Consultation in the assimilative capacity study does show that the ministry highlighted this smaller data set, and it's not exactly clear why they still chose to approve it, but there was notes in there about the facility wanting to be operational by 2022. And what is most important is that that condensed data set missed the opportunity to evaluate low summer flows and a second season of low summer flows. And that was a point that is new to today's presentation and supported by the expert that we had review this proposal. A short data set,
Oh, sorry.
it's okay.
Sorry about that.
A short data set can't reliably represent the river's natural variability. More importantly too, we want the data set to include what's happening past the bridge. I think that that's necessary. Going into our next slide here. This is a picture of my doggos. One thing that's not clear in the assimilative capacity study is whether or not the resort the study looks at water withdrawals. So we know that the resort right now holds an active permit to take water from the Goulais River. This would allow them to take 11.5 million liters a day for snowmaking and 131,000 liters a day for portable water. Now, do they take that much to date? I don't have the answer to that. But they have an active permit to do that, and it's not clear if that water withdrawal is included in their calculations within the assimilative capacity study. And as you can imagine, pulling water from the river would inevitably affect the condition of flow and how much water there is to dilute the waste. So if we go into the next slide, here's just a visual representation of that. This is a 10,000 liter water truck. Imagine 1,150 of these lined up once a day.
That wouldn't be good for the environment.
And again, they might not pull that amount right now, but it begs the question, would they then need to pull more once they reach their full expansion plan? That's unclear as well. So next.
It's clear to know what 11 million gallons does look like. I think it's mind-blowing, your pictures there, Jen.
I don't think there's a chance of never taking that much water either.
Oh, yes. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's tough to say because we know that just from this last season, right? One of their prideful moments was that they were the first resort in Ontario to open. And having lived in the region too, like I know that the snow guns, as soon as they had the conditions for them to run the snow guns, they were operating. So you're right, it's hard to say exactly what they would need.
Well, they're not taking water out of the watershed either. I mean, that's always part of it, is you're taking water out of the watershed, it never goes back in. In this case, all of it goes back in.
That's right.
I'm not pro or against, I'm
Yeah.
just saying it's a fact.
Yeah. And that's we had a community member in one of our other presentations too that also kind of brought up the fact of, what's no knowledge or seems to be no knowledge is that to make artificial snow, there's usually additives that are added into that too to make sure that it doesn't melt. So that's another question we have as well, is that the water that's being pulled and having additives put into it, what effects does that have on the watershed as it melts each season? So this is probably one of the biggest ones for us to dial into, and it's the fact that the species at risk and the environmental impact assessment is not complete. So in the design brief, it says that they retained a consultant to complete the environmental impact assessment, and that once it was available, it would be uploaded to the design brief under Appendix H, but to date, it has not been updated. It is not available for review. The whole purpose of the ERO is to provide us with an opportunity to comment on things that can impact the environment, but the environmental impact assessment is not available for review. What we do know is that the resort did have an environmental impact assessment done in 2019 for an adjacent pond on the property for snowmaking purposes. And that environmental assessment impact study did identify 13 species at risk just on that adjacent pond. It identified lake sturgeon, the wood turtle, multiple at-risk bird species, and then winter turtling and amphibian breeding habitats. It's my opinion that the public can't make meaningful comment on impacts to the environment without that full assessment being available. And I just want to take a minute here to dial into this specific image, and that's my baby girl there paddling. And this is such a beautiful stretch of the river, and why I want to share this specific piece is that if you know the Goulais River as I do, and you recognize the spot where the water's deposited or intends to be deposited, immediately after that section where the waste is going to enter the water, there's a long set of shallow rapids. And in the summer, those rapids are quite shallow. And right after that set of rapids is this pool of water. Up on the side here that you can't see would be the old Searchmont paper mill. And this is the sand bank that runs along Finn Road. And right around that corner is one of the deepest holes that I know on the Goulais. There's a big rock, and it's deep, cold water. And on the other side of that, there's another set of short rapids. And the significance of me sharing this photo is because this is such a unique habitat for juvenile lake sturgeon. Oftentimes, they get stuck in this pool, and even if they wanted to, they couldn't go upstream, they couldn't go downstream. They're stuck in there. So if by this plan, the resort would be year-round, full operational, and there's waste being introduced to the water when it's in this lower flow season, it begs the question of what impact it'll have to that lake sturgeon. There's so much to explain. That's just the one with the lake sturgeon. Lake sturgeon are thought to have been around for over 150 million years, and they're in danger. And the design brief recognizes that the Goulais River has one of the most diverse fish populations in all of Ontario. It also recognizes that there's certain activity windows where you can't do anything in the river because of lake sturgeon, brook trout, and walleye spawning. Yet it states that the water quality monitoring program they did shows that the system should have little impact on the water quality, but it doesn't really address what happens if something happens. What is the effect going to be to Lake Sturgeon? And if we know the Goulais River is part of these restricted no activity zones, brook trout running from September to May, how are we allowing anything into the river? These are standards set by the ministry for good reason. And part of our job is to also ask the ministry to hold themselves accountable to the regulations that they have set before themselves. There's a lot more to go in on this, but you'll find more information on the species at risk in the letter that you'll receive from Joni. So don't forget to give us your email. And if you're online, you can send it to Joni's email. There's a comment there. So next slide. Cumulative effects were not assessed. So the assimilative capacity study mentions accumulative effects, and it talks about kind of putting them into the equations and calculations, but it's not fully clear if the assimilative capacity study fully considers those withdrawals, if it considers septic beds that are upstream, that are downstream, because we know that there's septic beds all along the Goulais River and within the watershed. And how do we consider those? It doesn't look at stormwater runoff or forestry and land disturbances. It doesn't look at the Hydro One North Shore Link power proposal. And if you're familiar with that proposal, Hydro One wants to build a line that runs the majority of its way alongside the Searchmont Highway. And there's several small creeks and streams that line will now run through where herbicides are intended to be used, which would then enter those smaller water streams which make their way into the Goulais River. It doesn't seem to evaluate climate-driven low flows or resort expansion. Again, would they need more water? Their expansion plans, they're asking for not one, but 2 100-room hotels. They'd like to build a new restaurant and a conference center that has over, I think, 270 people for capacity. The accumulative effects assessment would be essential for the river that flows directly into Lake Superior, and it's just not clear if all of those contributing factors are fully considered. So we'll go to the next slide. So community engagement was minimal. They prepared for this application for 5 years. The documentation shows that they sat down with the ministry in March of 2020 for a kickoff conversation. I imagine they had their ducks to get in a row before it even made sense to tell the public, but the public received a single letter in March of 2025, 5 years later, and were given a 2-hour public information night opportunity, and opportunity to engage with the consultants directly, which would look different for everybody depending on how invested they got. What is clear is that through conversation and discussion, I think everybody seems to share this same sort of concern that it's just not clear, there's a lot of information, we're not really clear of what it looks like or how we feel about it or what we do about it. Meaningful consultation is required under the Environmental Bill of Our Rights. And the ERO process is our only opportunity to use the voice that we have. So next slide. So we're looking to make certain requests to the EMCP. The letters will actually include a few more. We're asking the EMCP to provide a scientifically defensible assimilative capacity, to show us proper mixing zone models, to provide multi-year monitoring, including winter and low flow conditions. We want them to incorporate the resort's water taking permits in their calculations, the completion and release of the species at risk and environmental impact assessment, detailed understanding of what those species are and what the mitigation strategies are. You know sturgeon are in there. What measures are being taken? What's the result? How are you going to make sure that they're not harmed? We want a full accumulative assessment and recognition and plans for monitoring those. Demonstration of compliance with Policy 2. So Policy 2, by government standard, means that if a water quality value is already at the provincial water quality limit, Policy 2 says it cannot be degraded any further. Phosphorus is already at that. So this should not, even by that point alone, be accepted to move forward. And we want transparent public consultation once all the documentation is available. Next one, Joni. So actually, we'll skip back to this one. So this is sort of in closing, but at this point, I'm going to pull up some of the expert guidance that we have.
Sorry, Jen, that policy 2 is in reference to which piece of legislation?
I wouldn't know that off the top of my head. I just know that they reference it as policy 1 and policy 2. So policy 1, and if I'm recalling correctly, means that a water quality value is close to that objective, but not exceeding it. So it has to be very closely monitored. Policy 2 says it's there, no further, nothing is further here. So I'm just gonna pull this back up here.
And also, we need, like, we don't want waste in our water because there's lots of animals that, like, need to have the water, like fish and ducks and, like, a lot of stuff like that. So, like, we need our water to, like, be, really, like,
Clean and safe.
yeah, clean and safe.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So we, like I said earlier, we retained a wastewater expert to review the proposal. Now her review, given limited time and funding, which we're very grateful for from Freshwater Futures, was based on the assessment that the assimilative capacity study did have defensible good data. So just keep that in mind. What we asked her to look at is there anything that pops out? And it was more than that. We had a multi-page document where we said, can you please go through this and look at it? So she was able to produce a high-level analysis of the proposal and what popped out. There's simply no way that we can get through that here, but in the letter you'll receive, which has the 2 attachments, the expert attachment that you'll see contains 18 pages. And in that, it summarizes what her comments were and what our calls to action are in response to them. She concluded that the proposed treatment technology is commonly used in Ontario and that it can perform well, but there are several design assumptions that appear to be incomplete or underestimated. These issues could affect what the plant's ability is to meet the affluent limits that were based off of the assimilative capacity study. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of her biggest concern, and then we'll just sort of highlight at a high level what the rest of them were. This expert review was done from an objective, fair point of view. So she does recognize throughout the process where the system is and will perform well. The biggest concern that she had was that it appears that the influent strength might be underestimated and may be more considered to be commercial wastewater or have commercial wastewater impact. So the design brief describes that the influent is typical domestic wastewater. However, based on the concentrations provided in the design brief under Table 5, it shows that the influent characteristics would align more closely with weak to medium strength domestic sewage, according to standard wastewater literature. What she further points out is that a significant portion of the projected wastewater flow, approximately half of it, will originate from commercial uses, including restaurants and conference centers. And these types of facilities are well documented to produce wastewater with substantially larger concentrations of total suspended solids, biochemical oxygen demand, TKN, which stands for total nitrin, total phosphorus, fats, oils, and grease. And she goes on to explain that commercial restaurant wastewater can have BOD, or biochemical oxygen demand concentrations, in several hundreds of thousands of milligrams per liter, depending on food type, cooking practices, dishwashing, grease management. In contrast, the design brief used in the report assumes that the BOD would be only 110 milligrams per liter, which is typical of weak domestic sewage and doesn't reflect the expected contributions of commercial kitchens. What she's getting at in here is that if the affluent concentrations used by the proponent in this system are likely underestimated for the facility with this level of proposed commercial operation activity. If 50% of the daily flow originates from restaurants and food service operations, all influent design concentrations, as listed above, should be reevaluated and increased to reflect the higher strength wastewater expected from these sources. Underestimating influent strength has direct implications for different performances and abilities to meet pneumonia limits, and a whole other list of bullet points that I probably can't pronounce the terms for. And I'm not going to try. What we're asking for the ministry, and just knowing this point, is to clarify the basis of these affluent concentrations used in the design and reassess if the influent strength does account for the substantial contribution from commercial grade restaurant and commercial kitchens, and to demonstrate that the treatment system is adequately sized for realistic BOD, TSS, TKN, TP, and FOG concentrations. These steps are necessary to ensure that the wastewater treatment plant is designed to handle the actual wastewater characteristics expected from the proposed development. So that was her biggest concern, and it's a lot to digest, but it's one of many. So I'm just going to skim over sort of the topic of the rest of them. She focuses in on peak flows. They may be higher than the design assumes. She looks at concerns for flow, design flows, and Ontario building code values, and flow monitoring. She looks at technology and recognizes that it's proven, but that performance would depend on accurate design inputs and proper operation, which we know will be the responsibility of the resort. She looks at the phosphorus removal technology and states, yes, that technology should be able to successfully meet the phosphorus limit. But she talks about how certain inputs may need to be reevaluated and lowered to create less room for error, because there's other systems across the province that have been shown to prove a better ability to remove total phosphorus. But let's not forget that phosphorus is already at the provincial water quality objective. She talks a little bit about buoyancy control and the need for airtight construction. This was, one of the biggest lines highlighted in here is noted as the weight tightness of the buried tanks and piping is equally important and doesn't seem to be addressed in the design brief. Now, these are all things that, if the wastewater treatment plan is approved and granted an environmental compliance approval, we as the public, in sending this information to them, would be doing our due diligence. The next one she highlighted was the UV disinfection limits and the need for redundancy. The proposal includes only one single UV disinfection train, sized for maximum flow. She notes that it creates a single point of failure. If the UV unit requires maintenance or experiences an equipment issue, the plant would have no ability to disinfect the affluent, which could result in noncompliance and increased pathogen loading to the receiving river. Now, they may fix that. Her recommendation would be additional UV tanks, a backup when maintenance is needed. These are things that need to be done if this is operated. She highlights pneumonia limits, nourification capacity, and concerns about the underestimated influent nitrogen. And I want to also regroup and clarify too that the letter you're receiving is our understanding and summary of what she had, and the results you can, like the raw information too, we can take you through that as well. But for the most part, word for word, this is the detailed explanation of her results. She talks about concerns about the proposed nitrate limit and errors found in the ACS. So she highlights that nitrate is not typically assessed or a part of an ECA application, but it is in the design brief, and it's usually only in there if the receiving water course is extremely low flow or highly sensitive. So we want to know from the EMCP is why is it in there, amongst a few other things. She talks a little bit about BDO limits and expected performance. And she notes that it's fully capable of achieving the required BOD removal that she highlights, but notes that across the province, they can typically achieve lower than that, and recommends that that would be adjusted to provide less leniency. She talks about total suspended solids performance and feels that that was adequately addressed. But for us, it poses the question of wanting to ensure that it's demonstrated and that the influent conditions are accurate. She looks at missing treatment, so the scanning and grit removal, which basically focuses on anything that enters the system before treatment. She talks a little bit about redundancy and multi-train SRB design and need for additional flexibility. And these points or these titles are our titles that kind of summarize each of the sections. She notes for this one that the same level of redundancy and operational flexibility is not provided for the additional filter and the UV system. She notes that this creates two single points of failure. If either unit requires maintenance or experiences a system issue, the plant would have no ability to filter or disinfect the affluent, which could result in noncompliance and increased environmental risk. Another one was consideration of alternatives and implications of the expansion scale. And this is a big one. There's a lot of conversation that, where we focus on the fact that the system they have right now is no good and that they need a new one. Nobody's arguing that. But what we also know is that the grandiosity of the expansion plans being proposed is what makes the river the only viable option. It's that the grandiosity of what's being proposed. And we talk about that a little bit in the letter to say that the full-blown expansion being proposed is what influences the required treatment capacity and the decision to discharge into the river. If the expansion were perhaps smaller, maybe subsurface options would be viable and would eliminate the direct need and impact to the river. And if anything, we want to remind everybody that this is not a municipality that has infrastructure and demands that need to be met, like right now, because there's a risk. We're talking about business expansion. Our expert noticed that there was no backup power mentioned. Backup power is not a requirement of an application like this. It is a business decision if they choose to have backup power. but it is unclear that it wasn't considered or doesn't appear to be considered in this process. Again, backup power is not a part of the ECA, but she would recommend that maybe the business or their consultants haven't considered backup power. And backup power is, in my opinion, a critical piece. If you have 200 hotel rooms filled in a fully operational hotel and a hill in use, what happens if we have power outages? And we have power outages in the rural location that the hill is located in, and with the heavy winters that we get. So going into the monitoring plan, there's no monitoring plan listed in the design brief. The assimilative capacity does tell us that a requirement of approval would be having a monitoring program. But there's no insight to what that monitoring program would look like. And that's important. We want to know what is being proposed for a monitoring program. And in addition to that, what would be an excellent additive to this is if there was a way to have a community-led, third-party monitoring program funded by the proponent that would allow that monitoring program to be conducted by a professional wastewater expert or data collection expert or institute that would allow us to, like Joni had mentioned earlier, get funding for those backpacks and create a comprehensive monitoring program that we can use in partnership with the resort, should this be chosen, where they would not be responsible for the monitoring, but the community would. And we would have the same standards as they would for that program. And that's something we can request through the CRO process. And then the assimilative capacity study data length and the seasonal coverage. So she mentions that the ACS from her high-level review seems to follow typical methodology. And she notices that it does have a decent data set, but there was missed opportunity to get a second season of low-flow summer conditions. And that the ministry does typically require 2 to 3 years for surface data, but they only collected over 16 months. What we would request here, and what we would love to request here, is a full monitoring set of data. We want the 2 to 3 years. We want the data past the bridge at Highway 17. And this is our opportunity to ask for it. In our conclusion, in this letter that you'll receive, it just talks about how the health of the river can't be an afterthought or a casualty of any sort of rush design work. They're asking for permission to discharge treated wastewater into a small, sensitive watercourse that is already showing signs of seasonal distress, stress, and low flow conditions. To have land is such a responsibility. And in this ECE, if it's approved, it's going to be the community and the watershed that bears the consequences. We're asking the EMCP to review all of what we want to be brought forward, and you'll see the closing in that letter that we have. So if we want to go to the next slide, I think I kind of touched on this a little bit. But this is not about just simply opposing development, complaining to complain about our feelings. It's about the facts. It's about ensuring that the development does not harm the Goulais River. It's a river that's ecologically important, culturally valued, and directly connected to Lake Superior. It's about our public right to meaningful consultation. Fair opportunity to consider the full extent of the wastewater treatment plant and its impacts to the environment, aquatic, and human health. It's our right to advocate, protect, and defend endangered species from going extinct. Protecting our natural resources from harm and exploitation. Holding the proponent and the Ministry of Environmental Conservation and Parks to high standards outlined by the government already for good reason. It's preserving what fresh water is left on the planet, which we know science shows us is declining. It's about doing what's ethnically and morally right, if not for ourselves, for our children and their grandchildren's children's children, before it's too late. So that's a lot of information, and we recognize that, which leads me to our next point in full closing, is that we're hoping that you feel empowered to use your voice on the ERO. If we go to the next page, you know, your voice does matter, and it sounds corny and cheesy to say, but it's the truth. And there's a lot of information to share. And so if you leave us with your email or you reach out to the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy, what you'll receive is you'll receive an email that has 3 attachments. The first attachment has your step-by-step instructions on how to put the comment in. The second attachment will have a letter that contains the contents of what we talked about today, the non-expert supporting documentation highlights. The third letter you'll have will contain the expert informed letter. And again, this expert informed letter is our summary of the review that we had conducted. What you can do, and it's quite simple, is you open the attachment, copy and paste all of the black text, click the link at the top of the Word document, it'll bring you straight to the anonymous commenting page, and you paste it. We would highly encourage you to customize it to be your own. If it's more manageable for you, you can put it in individual sections, but it's designed so you can copy the whole thing and paste it in. But again, would recommend you putting your own unique thoughts and concerns and comments, and use what we've provided for you today to give you a basis to go off of. The deadline closes tomorrow at midnight. And this is the last opportunity for you to contribute in this proposal. Thank you.
I know we have somebody who's waiting here. As the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy, I think you'll note that Jen, as a citizen of this community, has gone to an inordinate, not just days and weeks long, but months long deep dive into this. I belong to a Great Lakes Network group that we monthly meet around the Great Lakes. And I hear stories like this of the citizens who commit sometimes years of their life to making a difference on something like this to help us all partake in a process that is supposed to be accessible for us. So Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy is deeply grateful for this opportunity to uplift Jen's work and to additionally add to it the experts' review of it, and to engage with the community to give you an opportunity to also comment. We have a little person sitting here who wants to get up and have a few words. Come on up.
Yeah, this is, I'll introduce her too. This is my oldest daughter. Her name is Jelena, and really, truly, this is my purpose. So I'll be the first to admit that there's so many causes that have kind of crossed my awareness that I've, never, have looked at another way or did not engage the way I should. But when it ends up in your backyard, it really makes your hair stand up. So I'm doing it for her, and she drew a beautiful little picture. If you want to share.
So
Yeah, let's hold it up. We
Yeah.
can
my
see it.
name's Jelena, and
Here, I'll hold
I
it up.
made this. It says, "Help our water, and we love our water." And I made this little book. You guys can see it.
Thanks.
Our water. I'll read it. I love our water because I can swim in it, and it is warm and cool. And there's a little picture. I love my water. And also, like we've been talking about and what I said when I was sitting down, we need our water to be clean and safe, because there is like
Give you that to hold and
you can
speak into it.
and there is like ducks and fish and other stuff that that like lives in the water, so we need our water to be clear and safe for animals to swim in. And also, we also need our water because kids like love to swim. And on July, my birthday's on July 15th, and we like to swim. So we go to the backyard, and I bring my cousins and my friends, and we swim in the backyard, and we play games. But the most fun game that I love is that we go on a tube, and then we pretend they're sharks, and then we like one of our friends fall off, and then one of us dive in to get them. So we really need our water, and to let it be like clear, safe, and that the water brings us like water to drink, like tap water or water like that, and that the water is really beautiful.
Thank you for sharing, Joe.
She miigwech. A mom and her young champion for water. All of those hours and weeks and days that maybe took Jen away from being able to go down for a swim or boat on the river as she's taking care of all of this work are just pretty emotionally impactful when you see your children being influenced in such a positive way. She's a champion for the future, this young gal. We'll make it. It's already nearly 2:30 or 3:30. I would like if anybody had any burning things that they wanted to just reminding you of this process again. If you can leave us with your email, I can send you these materials. It honestly will take you 10 minutes to do. If you add your own stuff, that'll take a little bit longer, and you can do multiple inputs to the system. And I am available. Please just call me or email me if you need help. I can walk you through it. We just want everybody to have an opportunity to participate in this very important public process.
Thank you, Joni.
Okay. We're all good?
And thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, all of you. It's so important. Jimikwach, everyone. So maybe we'll just, I don't know if anybody has anything they would like to share or add to the conversation today.
So where things are at now with all the studies that are being done, how far along is the green light for the resort to get the approval? Like where is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I had the slide to show, but the decision tree puts us at the top right now. So it's, and I say decision tree because it shows sort of the flow of how these applications go through. So the very first step is them approaching the ministry, and then they would have to have a assimilative capacity study done. And then then they would have to do an ECA pre-submission where the ministry would look at that assimilative capacity study and see if it can even move forward in the process. And it was moved forward in the process. And now that it's posted on the ERO, that's where the public commentary window comes up. So I don't know the tree exactly from that point, but it is at the top right now. So this is a critical piece in the decision-making tree, because from here, it'll move into what did the design brief show us? Was the assimilative capacity study solid and defensible? And what does the public think about this? What concerns may have been missed in the design brief that the public brought forward? So this isn't if they get this, it's, you know, there's gonna be, we're at the top of the decision. But this is the only opportunity that we have as the public to contribute in that decision tree.
So is there gonna be any more public consultation on this?
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, I just heard about this just the other day. And and I knew there's, you know, arguments against it, but I'd never heard of anything official,
Yeah.
just for information for myself.
Yeah, not that I know of. So the only people that were contacted in the spring and March were anybody in the local area, Indigenous communities, and anybody that was, you know, would have been affected shortly downstream. I did hear that people in Goulais downstream didn't get the same notification, but the one available public opportunity was July 16th of 2025. And it was the 2-hour window or 2-hour event that was hosted up at the Searchmont Community Center.
Yeah, I guess I just never heard of it, so.
Yeah.
And it's really sad because like my sister, I mean, kind of like. Okay.
Keep on going. I'll hold it.
And
Why is it really important?
because some people kind of grew up near the water, like we did, and that the water is like we need to be safe and clear, and because like when I'm probably like a grandma, I'm probably gonna get grandkids, so they're probably gonna love the water as well. So we want this water to be safe, clear, and like let everyone enjoy the water with not like waste in there.
Thank you, Julina. And the river is so significant to us because I would be 4th generation out there and you would be 5th.
Yes.
So our roots have been there a long time. Is there any other questions?
You'll probably be able to hear me, I'm pretty loud, so.
Yeah.
First of all, Jen, thanks so much, obviously, first time I've ever met you, but, amazing job, massive amount of time you put into this. Gary and Joni, I've known you guys for a long time, worked with you guys before, you obviously put a lot of heart and soul into this, so, thanks. Couple questions first. Any wastewater expert from the proponent? Has there been anybody, do we know if there's been a similar expert that has either published or not published anything that they've gotten?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for your recognition too. Much of the work has been, you know, since the posting has come out in October too, so it's been a very condensed time frame. From my understanding of the information, Greenland International was the environmental consultant that was retained to do the assimilative capacity study. And then Kristen Engineering is the engineering firm retained from the resort to work with the resort to determine, so the resort essentially came to the table and said, this is what we want to do, what's available, and this is our budget, this is what we want. And then they had to, so they have two consultants that we know, like I said, Greenland and Kristen Engineering. What we know is that through the ERO process, when the ECA is reviewed, or the environmental compliance approval, there will be senior wastewater engineers that will be the ones who comb through this design brief. During the environmental compliance approval pre-consultation or pre-submission, where they sent the assimilative capacity study, that was looked over by hydrologists, and I think they were both hydrologists from a different branch of the MECP. So they looked at the ACS, and they're the ones that engaged back and forth with Searchmont and Greenland to highlight different values. And they did produce their final recommendations, which are in the design brief as well, where they also recognize that phosphorus is at policy 2, and that certain, that the water quality monitoring program provincially run was done in 1990. So there were certain things that they flagged, and there were certain recommendations they made to ask, to say, if this assimilative capacity in the design brief, you want your design brief to say this. So That probably sounds confusing, but somebody that it does know hydrology did review that assimilative capacity study and made a list of recommendations.
I'm just trying to understand, I guess, is, because to me, one of the strongest positions here is the independent consultant that's reviewed now, that from Burnside, that you guys got to review. Do we know though, are those points gonna be in opposition to the, like, was that kind of like, are there just two contrasting opinions from two different, you know, independent consultants, or do we know how that sits at all? Has there been any assessment of that?
Not to date. Well, and hopefully I understand the question properly, but
'Cause-
we
So maybe I can
yeah.
re-clarify.
Yeah,
So you presented the points from the independent consultant, wastewater consultant that you got. There's some pretty strong points in there, I think, that, you know, in theory, the ministry will have to take into account. I think one of the risks is if the consultant that has been, you know, you hear this all the time, right? And this is one of the challenges that happens all the time. If you have two different expert opinions, I mean, then it becomes not so much about the expert opinion anymore. It becomes about either the business decision or the political decision, right? So I'm just trying to understand where that sits. Like, you know, is there a strong expert opinion on behalf of proponent that's showing things are okay versus an expert opinion that's showing it's not okay, or where does that sit? Because we've heard kind of one side today. I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
the best chance of pushing on this.
So, in my understanding of it, Kristen Engineering, which is the engineering firm that designed,
They're just for the design of the
They-
wastewater plant, yeah.
well, they hold the same credentials as Anne,
Okay.
our expert.
Okay.
So, if Searchmont had retained her to do this, she would have been the one to build the design brief,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Okay.
So, her review of the design brief is from an engineer standpoint, and specifically an engineer that has, you know, her whole career in wastewater specifically. So she's highlighting things from her position of expertise. And it's very important that we clarify too that it was a high level analysis. She couldn't even get into all of what we wanted. We just asked her, if the assimilative capacity study is defensible, like could you see if anything sticks out, and some things did, but can the wastewater treatment plant in proposal really meet these limits, and is there anything that comes up? And like I mentioned earlier, she recognizes that the technology chosen is capable of performing well. That's not in question. It's a good unit, it's a good supplier, the system has all the makings to work properly, but what she highlights is just that some of the assumptions around the quality of the influent before it's treated and becomes affluent, if I got that right, is what she's kind of highlighting from her position of expertise. So to paint a picture of what that looks like now is if the ministry now receives this letter from the public and everybody uses their own thoughts and comments in alignment to these comments that we were able to get, it shows a bigger engagement. It shows that we're not just coming there and saying, we don't want this, get it out of our water. We're saying, this is what was highlighted and this is how I feel about that, right? Like, it just gives us an opportunity to use good information to form meaningful comments.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's great. The information, I know you guys are sending it in those letters. Is there a website or anything to send, like, the gang at Sioux Today or other media outlets to be able to kind of go through this in more detail so that they can do some research as well versus like a directed letter? Because I think, you know, again, news outlets aren't going to take a directed letter from somebody that's got a position on this, but it'd be great to send them to someplace where they can do some independent research on this.
Yeah, good question. And I don't know if I can answer that.
Or can that
As
information
much
be
as
put
I-
up someplace?
Well, what we're really hoping for is over the last 3 days, between the in-person, participation that we've gotten and the live stream participation, that enough, anybody's welcome to reach out to Joni and receive these letters.
You
And
can pass these letters along, and what you receive, you can put out
Yeah.
there however you want. It's
you can forward the email you received from Joni so that more people have the letter. You can review this this, today's recording or share it with people that you might think,
You guys are gonna send the links out for today's recording? and stuff, or
we could send the links out for
you can Put
the,
it in the email. I think those are all good things to.
Yeah.
To get some more media attention on it, right?
yeah, and so the big thing to mention with that too is like, at this point, we might not get the media attention that we need before the deadline, because it's tomorrow at midnight. So, and once it closes for us, it is, our opportunity through the public way of giving information is not there. But that doesn't mean we can't have a voice once it closes either, because it still has to go through the other steps of the process. And some of the things we're asking for in this letter is additional opportunity to review the things that are missing, like the species at risk and environmental impact assessment. So maybe there will be new opportunity in the future or extended opportunity for us to contribute, but what we know now in this moment is that it closes tomorrow, and that short window of time is closing fast.
I'd like to highlight and say that we had a meeting here, a Goulais River gathering, and it was a high-level just gathering, and Jen arrived, and the news that night, because it was the 19th of November, was that the work that she had done convinced the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to extend the date to January the 12th. Had we not had that, the deadline was actually posted as November 23rd, and there would have been no opportunity to do any of this, and it was a scramble just to get the funding, to get the expert who even over the Christmas holidays addressed this in such a short turnaround. So I just want to make clear, because it seems like, well, couldn't you guys have done this a bit faster? It's been a marathon and now a sprint.
Yes.
So
Yes. And
that's
just,
the reason.
yeah, and to speak on that too, the sort of the hypervigilance that comes through with it all is just the idea that, I was kind of navigating this path solo since March, and then in July, and I remember coming out of July and thinking to myself, how the heck am I don't know. And so there was one of the biggest regrets that I have is that I didn't start this deep dive back in March, but I didn't know. And when I came in here on November 21st, and I was coming in with, a 460-page design brief going, I'm looking at this and I'm breaking it down in bite-sized chunks, and I would just look at one piece at a time. What does this mean? What can I find on this? What ministry guidelines are out there? What does the news say about this? And just piecing it all together and, cold calling experts and whatnot. So the last 2 months really have been just a really tricky time trying to, still make it into this window. And, there has been a lot of public interest, which is why it was extended. But a big part of that was that when you looked at the original copy of the design brief, all of the consultation that I personally had with the consultant representing the proponent wasn't included in the documentation, and I had been told that many lines that all consultation would be included. And so when I seen that, it just kind of like made me wonder if my comments and concerns were excluded, who else had their comments and concerns excluded, which then made it necessary for me to reiterate all of the questions and concerns that I had and put them in my own words, which was probably the best approach anyhow. So the deadline extension it's a very rare thing that can happen. But there seems to be a common trend, and that's that everybody that hears of this is worried. And everybody's feeling a little overwhelmed and not sure what to do about it. Like, what do you say? What do you do? Where do you start? So, when Joni asked me, I think on December 28th, what I thought about doing, in-person presentations, the day after we reached out to the expert, it was kind of like, okay, well, we've got 12 days. So what do we do? And it was really the last 2 weeks really has been such a sprint to figure out how to get this information more accessible. How do we bring this forward without causing everyone to glaze over?
We did have it down to 2 pages for each thing, and we just went back in and said there's too much good material here to do that. So hence the attachments.
Yeah.
If you want the 2-pagers, I'm happy to send them out too. So if you're having difficulty with the longer ones, anything that we can help you with, please just reach out to us. We have several formats of this content, which on the expert part was actually had to be reviewed as well, because in assimilating all her data into 2 pages, we had to make sure that Anne was happy with the assimilation of the data. So I just want to make note of that, because you're thinking, oh, they just plugged it into AI, got a short form, and there we go. Every single word was vetted, and so I'm just going to
10 times
grab you
over.
for a question.
Have you shared Anne's report with Batchewana First Nation?
Yeah, so we're hoping to share it with Batchewana First Nation too, because it's available to anybody as well. So hoping to send that to the Métis Nation of Ontario, Garden River, Batchewana First Nation too. Anything that can help.
I
Yamano.
posted on the, post the link, like if you have the link available for the report, post it on the Facebook story that's already up from Batchewana First Nation. And that's what I'd say to everybody, like, what you guys are suggesting to do here, I mean, I'm gonna go home and do this, I think everybody should do this, like, what you guys have done is great, but honestly, get out on social media, it's really, like, get on the Goulais Facebook groups, there's a couple Facebook groups at Goulais, and go on, I'm gonna post on LinkedIn, I don't normally do personal stuff on my professional LinkedIn, but I'm gonna post this on LinkedIn. Copy in, tag in Terry Sheenan, tag in Bill Rosenberg. It's gotta get public with these guys, so they gotta be concerned publicly that it's gonna be an issue. That's what's gonna change it, right? I mean, just look at the WestJet story about the legroom, right? I mean, they already redesigned how many planes, now they're reconsidering it, right? I mean, that's, unfortunately, we're in this day and age where that's what gets traction, right? It's gotta get enough public views, and the Batchewana First Nation Facebook post was pretty good about this, about the lack of information, so I'd post a link to the report there if you guys have it up.
Yeah, well, today we did share the live streaming link with the Goulais River page, the what's happening in the Sioux page, Batchewana First Nation. There is a Facebook group dedicated to protecting the Goulais River. It's called We Must Guard the Goulais River.
Yep.
It has just over 750 members, which has grown in just the last 8 weeks. There's good information in there too. It's a space that is for everybody to share. Again, the deadline's tomorrow, so it really is critical that we get it in there. But there's a cause and effect, right? If everybody in this room makes a comment and gets 5 people they know and love to make a comment, and those 5 people do the same thing, the potential to get the involvement is there. So
The algorithms, the way the social media
Yeah.
algorithms work to go exponentially if a few people start doing it, so.
And I think it's important to mention too that like ERO comments, like there's certain standards for their comments too. So if the comments are, contain profanity or it's just feelings and it's, it won't be considered, it'll be dismissed. So I would hate to see people waste their time and energy doing that. But also, you can put personal testimony in there, but if there's anything in it that would identify you or where you live or who you are, then it just wouldn't be published. It would be considered, but it wouldn't be published publicly. But once this decision's made, the comments that were submitted that were approved for posting will be viewable by everybody, again, with no identifying information. And if you have an account and you on the ERO, you can submit your comments underneath the notice and keep track of it. So for example, for my comments, it showed me that they were under review, and then it showed if they were approved. And to date, everything I've submitted has been approved, which means that it met their guidelines and it was relevant to the proposal. You could also follow this specific Environmental Registry of Ontario posting, and you'll get email updates if there's any extensions once the decision's made. So you'll get like that automated email because you've followed the notice on the ERO website.
Will there be any more water quality testing? Because beyond the bridge, there are more residences, camps being turned into year-round residences, the old garbage dump, leaching from the garbage dump. There's 3 branches. I would think that the water should be tested at the start to each branch and the end of each branch.
I would agree with you. And we had somebody that participated in our first event on Friday who brought that forward because they said, well, where's the downstream sampling spot that they use for their monitoring program? And I said, well, it's the Highway 17 where the river meets the highway. And he went, well, what about the rest of the river? And he had mentioned the same thing. There's a lot of big chalets going up in there. He had mentioned a pulp mill in the area. I don't know much about that, but it really begged the question of when you look at the map, you know, this is where that sampling was. It doesn't account for the rest of the Goulais all through here or what's happening in Goulais. But what the data does tell us is it's at that, you know, provincial water quality objective. So I would agree with
I
you.
would think it would be worse downstream.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, at least if the data is showing us it's that there consistently, then what is it past that point? So that's something that I think is more than reasonable to ask the ministry for. And I think that that should be information that has its own 2 to 3 year data set.
And when I was talking about like
Come on over. Here we go.
I
Sorry,
was
it's in the mic. There you go.
when I was
There you go.
talking about the like about the water and stuff, about the animals. Also moose, and there's deer, and there's foxes and raccoons sometimes. Because one time I saw a raccoon that was like drinking water, mostly, and moose drink water, and so we need the water so then they can drink from the water. And they also like to swim there. And I saw a fox once drink the water from the river. And what was the other one I said?
You
Well, I
made
think
me
I
think
can-
of something
yeah.
right now, and that is that I think you're going to be a water quality monitoring person with us. So I want to make clear about the program, because just in case you're misled by thinking that the proponent has to fund this. In order for a water quality monitoring program to work really well, you need it funded for the long term, and that's where a corporate sponsorship partnership comes in really well. Nordic at Algoma University has a really robust and like years of their Water Ranger program. They're already doing this work with Garden River, Batchewana First Nation, Missinabee Cree First Nation, and we are already discussing doing this program, because getting a baseline on the river right now, getting our backpacks lined up. We're not waiting for anyone to pay for this. We've got funding under Freshwater Future to get a program started here in Goulais River. I had hoped to have the head of the Water Ranger program here today, but we are going to be talking about that later this week. So I just want to sort of assure you that I love that you bring up this, because it is that activity of going to the river, to have that constant engagement with Goulais River, that reminds us of who we're doing all of this work for. And by meeting our other relatives down at the river, we get, it's not just about us. So, Chi for bringing that forward.
And one thing I don't know if we've mentioned too is that above, like past, up the Goulais River, before Searchmont, the Goulais River is actually recognized as the Goulais River Provincial Park. So upstream, it's classified as a water provincial park. So it's unclear why then the rest of the river isn't classified the same way. Yeah. Is there any other questions or anything
I'll
that's
ask you one more, Jen.
okay?
So you've already seen the studies that shows that we're already at our 30% of phosphorus at the bridge, at the highway. Is there any, and that may put a pause on everything at that level if everything's done properly, I'm assuming. Is there any indication of how much of phosphorus is gonna be put into the river at that plant at, say, average usage, or
Yeah, so the design brief shows that, so the provincial water quality objective is 0.030. And they assume that and I might get this wrong, but they assume that the plant will only contribute 0.0007. So what they're saying is that the quality objective of the province is 0.030, the plant will take it from 0.031. So just a little bit. And our expert did acknowledge that the plant does have the capability of only putting out that little bit and removing all the rest of the phosphorus before it hits. But it doesn't excuse the fact that it's already at that limit.
And you made mention that a lot of that phosphorus is a natural occurrence
Yep.
in the
Yeah. Yeah, it's a natural nutrient. It's just when it becomes excessive that it has those issues. And in that water advisory, boil advisory that was issued in May for the Goulais Bay, it was a result of the blooms and the organic matters and whatnot, and noted that it's a typical natural process when the Goulais sort of sheds that time of year.
I would like to speak to that a little bit because when we say phosphorus, think of Lake Erie turning green. Think of 6 Mile Bay on Georgian Bay turning green overnight. Think of now on Lake Superior, we never used to have blue-green algae blooms at all. But what's contributing to this as well is that is the fastest warming of the big lakes in the world, Lake Superior. And Goulais and Batchewana Bay are extremely vulnerable because of their shallowness and that warming, and it's creating those conditions for it to be exponentially, more augmented by having that phosphorus. Phosphorus alone, but as Jen pointed out, it encourages those kinds of algae growth. And the cumulative impact of it is what creates a situation where overnight, blue-green algae blooms. We have already seen signs up around Thunder Bay, which you can't go in the water. You can't, let alone like the boating and that. You can't fish, you certainly can't swim, and you can't drink the water. Blue-green algae is toxic. So I just think, sometimes people get a little up there with the phosphorus and all these different names, but think of what the implications of that mean for Goulais Bay with phosphorus overload.
And that 0.0007 is based on the calculations they used, right? Which didn't take into account, you said, the higher capacity potential in the future, right?
Yeah, so it's the design brief is based on their full expansion. Okay. So it says that the wastewater treatment plant will only produce a tiny bit of phosphorus in its affluent. So, and our expert did agree with that the system is capable of only producing affluent that has very little phosphorus. So she recognizes that. But it's the fact that it's already at phosphorus at that data sample set. So adding anything more violates policy 2. And again, that policy 2 says if it's already at that objective that the province set, no more is allowed. So by the resort saying, well, it's just a little bit more, we have to ask the ministry to hold themselves accountable to their own standards because it is already there.
And it might be over that, closer to the bay.
And it might be over that, past that bridge, yeah.
So her concern about, sorry, because maybe I took my notes down wrong before, but there was some concern she raised about some of the calculations not being based on the expansion, or did I misunderstand?
Yeah, so she did talk about the quality of the influent. So how, and my understanding is the quality of what's coming into the system. Into the treatment system. So in the design brief, there's a table that shows where they predict all the affluent will come from and how much. So it says we think we'll have this much come from a conference center, this much from a hotel room, this much from the patio kitchen, or whatever it shows in that table. And it's all classified as, domestic sewage. But what she highlights is that, well, restaurants, by industry standards, has a higher concentration or that higher BOD, which is that biochemical oxygen demand. And so by that standard, they might have not accounted for how much of, what the quality of the waste going into the plant will be, which is a big consideration to have. Yeah.
Well, if all the questions have been, whoops, I'll come up to the front again. I know people who are online, we've greatly thank you for your time today as well, and for all of you for coming today. Hopefully, and again, by providing your email, I'll only be using it for this purpose. If you check the boxes off, we can give you information of interest in the water quality monitoring program. And yeah, just happy to keep in touch, and we'll hold more of these Goulais River gatherings. Yeah. We'll bring our coffee next time. Yeah. And have snacks, we promise.
Yeah. And yeah, just truly, thank you for caring, for sharing, for showing up. Your voice does matter, and it sounds cheesy, but it's true, and it's your right. So please leave us with your email. Take those letters. You have a day and a half to action it, and just really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for being here and for caring. I want to say
something. I hear so often people say, so what can I do because I'm just one person, but guess what? You did something.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Great work.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I do it with much humility. Thank you. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll wrap it up.
Muffin is $1.50.
Oh,
Can I get a